Well, good evening, first grade families. We appreciate you being here this evening. My name is Adam Swinyard, and I'm the superintendent for the district. And we are joined here by a team of our district leaders to share with you an update and information on phasing our first graders back to in-person instruction. And we know that this has been a long and hard road for everyone since March. And we know starting from the disruption to your students' kindergarten year, to learning how to do school online, and then beginning this year in a real-time distance learning model has been a lot to adjust to. And it's been a challenge for kids. It's been a challenge for you as parents, and it's been a challenge for our staff. And it has taken a lot of planning, a lot of teamwork, a lot of listening, and a lot of problem solving to help us all navigate through this and provide the best possible experience for our kids. So we're excited to have this conversation with you tonight. We know that there are many wonderings that you have, and we are eager to answer as many questions as possible and share with you what it will look like from both a teaching and learning as well as a safety perspective. Many of the pieces that we have in place will look very similar to the process that we just went through with our kindergarten students. We're optimistic that since October 7th, we have had a very positive start for our kindergartners in in-person instruction. We've had overwhelmingly positive feedback from staff and from families. That doesn't mean there hasn't been some challenges, and it doesn't mean there's been some habits and some new learning and some routine for everyone to get used to, but overwhelmingly, the response and the feedback has been positive, and that staff and students and families are happy to have their students back into school. We're also very optimistic that since October 7th, we've only had one situation where COVID has been transmitted inside of our schools. And so obviously we're watching that data very closely. It's monitored on a day-to-day basis. We have a team of contract tracers, and you'll hear more about that later in the presentation, that are working very hard. They're following up on every situation, and we're taking the appropriate steps in partnership with public health officials as we work to ensure our students are safe. So we're optimistic that we've only had one situation of transmission. That's including all 54 of our schools. And we've got kids and adults in our middle and high schools. Obviously, they haven't transitioned back to full in-person learning at any grade level, but we've got a number of adults and kids in our buildings across all of our schools. And so we're very optimistic that we've had the data that we have seen so far, and we're committed to adhering very closely and staying focused on following those safety protocols. There was a lot of questions. Can kindergartners wear a mask? Can they socially distance? I've personally walked many of our kindergarten classrooms, and I'm happy to share that, yes, they can. They can learn those routines and they can be successful. It's different and it takes some adjustment, but our teachers have worked really hard and have done an excellent job, and we're learning along the way from them on how to make this better for everyone each step. One of the obvious questions that's out there is the uncertainty at the Spokane Regional Health District. And as we have frequently communicated throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, that we've worked very closely and are committed to following the guidance of public health officials at the Washington State Department of Health and our local regional health district. And our partnership with Dr. Lutz has obviously been an important part of that process. We've also worked closely with their chief epidemiologist, Mark Springer. We'll continue to do that as there is clearly uncertainty at the regional health district regarding what the future looks like for their leadership in the wake of the news about Dr. Lutz. So we are greatly appreciative of Dr. Lutz's partnership and his support and his guidance that he's provided us along the way. We have received no indication that the guidance that we have received from the Regional Health District should cause us to change our plans in any way, shape, or form. So we're moving forward based on the conversations that we've had with Dr. Lutz, and we'll continue to engage Mark Springer in conversations regarding how we respond as we wait eagerly to see what the days coming will unfold and show for the health district and what structure they'll have moving forward. So we've received, again, no indication that we should change our plan. So we are moving forward on the guidance that we've received, and we'll continue to follow that situation really closely and make adjustments as needed as we look to both the local and state level to our public health officials. So this evening, again, we're fortunate to have a great panel to share information with you, and leading us through that conversation will be our Associate Superintendent, Dr. Mark Anderson. So Dr. Anderson.
Well, thank you, Dr. Swinyard. We're pleased to offer you an orientation to what it's like to bring our first graders back to school starting next week. We've had a good experience with our kindergarten students. So tonight we're going to do a presentation for you. Feel free to use the chat feature in Zoom to ask questions during the presentation. At the end of the presentation, Heather Bybee, our Chief Academic Officer, will facilitate having various panelists answer your questions. We are recording this webinar and we'll send it out afterwards to first grade families who may not have been able to attend tonight, and also for you to kind of have a refresher on what we talk about tonight. So included tonight on our panel, you've met Dr. Swinyard, our superintendent. Heather Bybee is our Chief Academic Officer over all of our instructional programs. Clint Price is Executive Director of our elementary schools. Gwen Harris is Executive Director of our option schools. Becky Dowdy is our Director of Health Services, who's been working very closely with the health department and giving us guidance internally. Becky Ramsey is our Director of Special Education, and Sandra Gerard is our Director of Communications. So with that, what we're going to share with you tonight is information about various aspects of what we've been doing since June. We have been actually working with public health officials, the state superintendent's office, and we formed our own reopening task force. And we've had all these different subcommittees you see here on the screen: a safety and operations committee, an elementary education committee, a secondary education committee, special education committee, English language development services committee, intervention services, technology, full distance learning, and extracurricular. I think in sum, we had almost 200 plus staff members, parents, community experts involved in planning our reopening plan. And then, as Dr. Swinyard said, probably the key has been almost daily meetings with our health department on the guidance they have provided us about reopening schools, the practices that we should have going on in our schools for safety, and we'll go over those with you tonight, and as well as what our educational curriculum has been. So with that, I'm going to turn it over back to Dr. Swinyard to talk about what the schedule will be for bringing back first grade students starting next week.
So one of the things that we utilized when we brought kindergartners back is we started on an alternating schedule. And so we had an A group and a B group. And the rationale for that was to limit the number of students that were in classroom each day. And that was to support a really smooth transition for kids, enable the teacher to work with the small groups to practice those routines and make sure those habits were really well in place before we have all students attending at the same time. Starting on an alternating schedule was probably the number one piece of positive feedback that we heard from our kindergarten teachers. In fact, they have all asked if we could start kindergarten and even a typical year, start with an alternating schedule, because it was such an effective way for kindergartners to start their school experience in our buildings. And so we're going to follow that same method in bringing both our first graders back. And then as we have set a tentative date for second grade, that we would use a similar model. So you can see here that'll start on November 9th. And the dates are identified as an A day or a B day. Your school will communicate with you individually on whether your student is in the A group or the B group. And we'll follow that rotation through November 19th. And then on November 20th, all students will attend together. And when we say all students, that means the entire cohort of students in that particular classroom, which is anywhere from 19 to 21 students in a class. Those class sizes are built intentionally in order to make sure that we have set up the classroom and set up the desks that provide for 6 feet of social distancing during instruction.
Am I right, Dr. Swinyer? That'll probably be about 10 students in one group, 10 students in another group to bring them back to school.
Yep, it'll be approximately 9 to 11 students per group in the A group and the B group.
So specifically the schedule that we will operate when we bring back to school, I'd like Heather Bybee to talk about what the schedule will be like.
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Anderson. The way we have the instructional day built is between 8:30 and 2:25, which means drop off, which we'll talk about a little bit more later on, is between 8:15 and 8:30, knowing that families have to navigate. You might have students who are online and trying to figure out, am I taking them with me or am I getting them started? So we know that's why there's some grace there. Instruction from 8:30 to 2:25 will include lots of mask breaks, outside time. We are definitely telling families, prep your kids for weather, because the best place to be is outside when they're taking those breaks. And so we want our kids to be prepped to go outside whenever possible. Probably not following what we have traditionally done around weather, that if it's cold or if it's snowing, we're still going outside. So there would just have to be health hazards for us not to go outside. What the day looks like in itself is students will receive instruction in what they're normally used to: math, English, science, social studies, etc. But their specialists will also be there in person teaching in their spaces. So music, PE, art, and science will take place throughout the week. As I said earlier, mask breaks are built in. Recess time and special locations on the playgrounds are kind of set aside, like we talked with kindergarten groups. They each got assigned a portion of the play areas that they work throughout the week. All of our support staff is back and ready to welcome your children with open arms at a distance. So including our administrators, counselors, intervention team, our office staff are all there to answer questions and help your students start into school. And during the AB rotations, there will be links posted on our district webpage that have live class instruction for the days that your student is at home. So that kind of looks like a class meeting that is hosted by central office staff, and they read a book, they talk about the day, they lay out the expectations for learning at 8:30, just like they would and have been in remote. And then they come back at 11:30 and kind of do a closure activity where they will say, hey, tomorrow's your first day or your second day, make sure you bring this, this, and this, or make sure you have your backpack packed and ready to go. So they just kind of will be there. Like I said, the links will be on the website, so you don't have to look for it. They're just going to be right there. You can click in, and we'll be there with, we have quite a team that is teaching those classes, so it's pretty exciting.
So probably one of the critical things that we have done well so far, that we continue to plan to do, is we have a very well-developed protocol for keeping students and staff safe at school, and following all the guidelines that the health department experts have provided us, to include social distancing, wearing of face coverings, hygiene, and we'll go over those with you tonight of what we plan to do with your children. Becky Dowdy. Becky, if you'd wave. Becky is our Director of Health Services. Becky has been instrumental in helping us develop very strict protocols to keep our students and our staff safe. And the first one that we would like to go over with you is about the requirement that we have for doing what is called a health check. And school districts across the country have done this different ways, but these are the key things that Becky will review about if students have any of these symptoms, they should not be coming to school. So Becky, go ahead.
Thanks, Mark. Yes, we had quite a challenge ahead of us this summer, trying to figure out a way to make sure we got all of our students into the building efficiently and safely, and mostly germ-free. And so we didn't want to line them up at the door and screen them all before they came in. Just looking ahead to when we would have more students back, we wanted to be able to make sure that they were healthy before they came into the building, but without, again, having to line up at the door. And so we're really wanting to make sure that staff and students don't come into the buildings with some of these typical COVID symptoms. And yes, this is the time of year when it becomes a little bit challenging because we're also heading into flu season. So we're looking for cough, fever, shortness of breath, chills, aches, and honestly, even runny noses and congestion. Stomach upset. These are all things that we're really looking out for because they can be COVID symptoms.
So Becky, I understand you worked with our technology department this summer to figure out, so what's a kind of reasonable means to have this health check done before kids come to school, and you developed this health check app for families to use. Tell us a little bit about your thinking about that.
So our technology team did a great job on this, and we were able to say, these are the things we need to accomplish, and we need the family's help in double checking whether or not students are well enough to be at school. And so the team was able to develop an app that can be done online, and a parent can get on and they can let us know that the student is healthy before they come into our schools. And that report feeds directly to our office staff, the nursing staff, the building administrators, the people who need to know. And we're able to see that the student has had this health check done at home, and they're well and they can be at school. We know that that doesn't happen 100% of the time. And I know that we'll get this question. And so I'm just going to touch on it really briefly. If the student is not checked at home for whatever reason, that did not happen before they came into school, we do still check those students at the door. We take their temperature and we screen them for possible COVID symptoms at that time.
And I think a little later, Sandra Gerard, who's our communications director, will be talking about, we're going to actually send, after the webinar tonight, a link to this health check app so that and there's actually a training video, very easy to use. You can download it to your smartphone if you prefer, or you can do it online. But this is an important activity that we want parents to do for their students, either before they get on the bus or before they come to school. We are going to be providing a meal program, both breakfast and lunch for students. This is a part of a federally funded program. It is free lunch and breakfast through June of 2021. It's a little less options for students than what you would see during the normal year, but these breakfast and lunch will be served in the classroom, supported by our teachers, administrators, our nutrition and support staff. So students won't be eating in the cafeteria. We want them spaced 6 feet apart while they eat lunch. Our teachers, we actually went over this morning with them about how to, let students, like take down their mask, take a bite, wipe off their face, put their mask back up, and visit with other kids. So There's a teaching protocol that we'll have for students eating in the room. If your student has an allergy, food allergy, there are special meal options available. And simply go to our website, spokaneschools.org/meals, and you'll see what's being offered each day. But again, this is a free program for all students this year, sponsored by the federal government. We're also going to be providing transportation for our students who are eligible to ride. Students will need to do the health check before they get on the bus. They'll need to wear their face covering on the bus. Our buses will be cleaned thoroughly between runs. We are going to be able to keep the windows down to create increased airflow. So if your student is wearing the bus this winter, please make sure they're wearing a coat because it could get a little chilly in there. And if you are unsure if your student qualifies to ride the bus, simply go to our website. There's a bus routes link. It tells you the whether your student's eligible, the pickup times, the drop-off times, and we will start running the bus routes the very first day of school next Monday on June 9th. With that, we would like to go over with you what we're going to teach your students on health and safety. Everything from wearing face coverings to daily health checks to hygiene practices, physical distancing, Becky and her team of nurses, what they're doing on if there's a sign of COVID in the school. And then Sandra will be talking to you about all of the communication and training things we have for both you and your students. So let's start with face coverings. Becky, lots of questions about whether kids can wear face coverings, whether they'll keep them on. So let's start with the simple one. What kind of face coverings should parents provide for their kids?
Just a cloth face mask, just like the adults in our community are wearing out and about right now.
And what if they forget to bring one?
Yeah, which will happen. And so we do have a supply of disposable surgical masks that are available at our office. And teachers are able to get some of those for their classroom as well. So we can make sure that everybody does have one.
What if a parent thinks for medical reasons or other reasons their student can't wear a face covering? What should they do?
So this is that's a great question, and it's a conversation that we have had with some of our families who have medically fragile students, and we do require a mask exemption note from their provider, and we process each one of those notes individually in partnership with the health department. Just make sure that we have everything in place that we need to have. It hasn't happened often, but we do require a note from the doctor when that is needed.
And should that note come to the office staff or the principal or?
I've received it from the teacher in the classroom, okay, from office staff, from principals. So wherever that communication is happening between the parent and district staff, then they just send that to me.
And is that then your nursing staff and you process it with the health department?
Yes. Yep. And the building nurse is another great place to have that conversation.
What about face shields? I understand our teachers maybe can wear face shields. How about students?
So if a student, if the family opts to use a face shield, it needs to have the skirting at the bottom that drapes down onto the chest. The face shields that the instructional staff is wearing, they're wearing those at the front of the classroom when they're providing instruction, and then putting their masks back on when they leave the front of the room.
And Mr. Price, you've been a longtime teacher and principal in the district and now over all of our elementary schools. What about how are we going to teach kids how to keep their face mask on? How's that working?
Well, I've been out and about in a lot of schools over the last few weeks as we've had kids back, and students are doing a very good job. The teachers are being very diligent in teaching all of those safety protocols and the importance of not only wearing the mask, but washing hands and using sanitizer. And students are keeping them on for the most part. And sometimes if we drop one or they need a clean one, we have a disposable paper mask that they can that they can use at that time too.
And I understand our students have been in what they call SPS day camps since the first of school. And I've understood that they've pretty much quickly adapted to wearing face coverings, and we haven't had a lot of trouble. Is that true?
Yes, and in day camps, we've been serving kids kindergarten through 6th grade. And all of those students have been doing a very nice job. Again, staff have taken a lot of time and just explaining the importance behind following those safety protocols, and students are on board with it.
One of the times that we've had lots of questions about is, well, what do they do when they eat? And do they have to wear a mask while they're eating? And the answer to that is yes. And the response to that is typically, are you kidding? And the reality of it is it takes some practice and some work. And I was in a kindergarten classroom the other day, and the teacher was working with them on what that looks like. And you take a bite of your food, and if you're gonna chew for a while or maybe talk, then you take your napkin and you wipe your face and you put your mask on. And then you take your mask down, you take another bite. And if you're gonna take another bite real quick, then you take your bite and then you wipe your face and you put your mask on. And it was incredible to see a group of 5 and 6-year-olds really doing that very successfully. So some of these things at first, you first hear about them and they seem pretty problematic for little people. And our teachers are incredible, and our kids are really able to rise to the occasion. And sometimes they are more able to do that in a group setting. I have a 5-year-old, and what he'll do at home is sometimes different than what he'll do in a group setting when he's looking around at his peers and what his peers are doing, and kind of that social reinforcement. So our teachers are doing an amazing job with that, and our kids are capable. It takes some work and it takes some practice. The other thing, there's been a number of questions in the chat around mask breaks. And what a mask break is we take our kids outside. They're supervised and structured, they're socially distant, and then we enable them and give them an opportunity to take that mask down and have that mask break. But it's always supervised, it's always structured, and it takes place outdoors at this point.
Becky, can you tell us, just from a medical standpoint and COVID, kind of what the key components? Face coverings, we've heard, is one. Staying 6 feet apart is 2. Washing your hands a lot. So what's behind all that? Why is that effective, both out in public but also in our schools?
So the masks are to be keeping the germs to yourself. So they do provide protection in that way when we're coughing, sneezing, talking. That social distance is that 6 feet of distance is approximately how far we know that we can be safe if droplets are coming out of somebody's mouth or nose. And then washing hands, good old hand washing, that is just getting the germs off of our hands so that when we're touching surfaces and other people, that we have clean hands and we're not passing those germs on to somebody else.
So that kind of leads us to the next topic, is hygiene practices. Tell us, Becky, what you and your team are recommending, how often kids wash their hands. I know teachers are going to teach them this. I know we've ordered lots of hand sanitizer, but also kind of the cleaning protocols for high touch areas.
So I think every year, hand washing is a big part of what we're teaching our youngest students. Hand hygiene, just making sure that we're not spreading even normal cold and flu germs around to others in our classroom. And that's become more important than ever this year, of course. And so the students are being encouraged and are being asked to wash their hands when they start their day, before they eat, after they eat, and before they leave for the day. And we do have a supply of hand sanitizer in our rooms, and the students can use that with adult supervision. And we're having them sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, washing their hands 20 seconds, showing them how to get them really clean. And as usual, our fantastic custodial staff is really paying attention to those high touch areas. They've always done that. They're doing even more of that now. And so any surfaces that our students are touching, our staff is touching, they're getting deeply cleaned each day. So we are really, really paying attention to cutting back on the amount of germs that we have in our classrooms.
And speaking of our custodial staff, I understand they have worked with our teachers to actually set up the classrooms so that their desk or tables are spaced out so students are 6 feet apart in the classroom. Is that right?
That is correct. Everywhere you go in the district right now, you can see the little circles on the ground showing us where to stand, where to sit. The desks and where the students are sitting has all been measured out to make sure that we're maintaining that social distance even when they're sitting in class. So we have been very, very mindful that that is one of the most important things, one of the most important tools we have to keeping people safe and in school.
Then I know that kind of typical times during the school day where lots of people gather is during parent and student drop off and pickup. What are we advising there at the beginning and end of the day?
So we know it's very hard, particularly at the beginning of that school year. Parents traditionally have been able to come into the building with their students and come in to pick them up when they're coming to get them at the end of the day. And of course, at this point in time, we really are discouraging any sort of visitors from coming into our buildings, just because we want to make sure that we keep our staff and our students safe, and we would not want to inadvertently expose them to somebody who had the virus. So at this point in time, we're doing all of that activity outside.
And I understand we have staff who will be meeting and greeting parents and kids and getting the kids into their classrooms, so forth, so that it's a pretty smooth transition. I know Mr. Price has been working with principals on how to do that, and it went pretty well, am I right, Clint, for kindergarten?
Yes, it went very well for kindergarten. School staff came out to the drop-off zones at each one of the schools. So parents had a chance to give that hug and high five for that kind of first day of back in in-person learning to their students, and staff were right there to greet and bring students on in for the instructional day.
Very good. So next we have Becky. I know you and your team of nurses have been working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day at making sure that if there is a sign of COVID, that we're protecting our students who are in school and staff. So tell us about what happens if there's some symptom that looks like either a student or a staff member might have signs of COVID.
So yes, we have 42 nurses across the district, and so they are maintaining the health and safety at each one of our schools. But really, if a student becomes sick during the day, the process looks similar to what it would normally if we had a student get ill while they were at school. But if they are exhibiting symptoms that concern us, and we're thinking that it could be COVID, anything on that list of symptoms, we will take that student from the classroom, and they will go into the health room, and we will assess them. And if those symptoms are still concerning to us, we have a waiting room for students who do have these symptoms. And this is where the student would wait until the parent is able to come pick them up. And so we're pretty stringent this year about student health and when students can return to school after they've been sent home sick. And so to return to school, if you have some of these concerning symptoms, you'll need to have a note from your provider or a negative COVID test. And if you choose to not have your student tested, then we would ask that you keep your student out 10 days from the first day of their symptoms. And we're really doing this just to out of an abundance of caution, to be extra sure that we're not keeping kids in school who may have COVID.
So Becky, the learning I've had is it seems like we've had very effective protocols for both our employees and our students while in school. It seems to be, am I right, that most of the cases that we've had have happened outside of school during social gatherings, other areas versus in school. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes, and I think that reflects what is happening nationally. Our cases are mostly originating from outside, where people do again have those small gatherings. We're seeing a lot of cases come from that, but the transmission is not occurring in our buildings.
And we're seeing that it's primarily adults that are the ones that are bringing COVID into our buildings. We're not seeing significant occurrence rates in our kids. And as we've shared a couple of times, we're not seeing transmission take place in our schools, just that one specific circumstance so far. But it's primarily the decisions by adults happening outside of our schools that is bringing in the situations that we're dealing with.
So, Sandra Gerard is in our communications department. They have done a great job of developing some training videos for parents and for kids. So maybe you can talk about those, Sandra.
Sure. So yes, definitely a lot of information tonight. And the nice thing is, as Dr. Anderson mentioned earlier, we'll be sending out a postcard tonight that has videos. They're really family friendly, only about a minute long, that we suggest that you watch with your student. They'll cover face coverings, health check for students, hand washing, physical distancing, and returning to school. We did such a great video on returning to school. It's called A Return to In-Person Learning, the Elementary K-2 School Day. And it's really a day in the life of getting to school and then obviously going through the day and then after school. So it's a really neat video for you to watch with your student. And then we also sent out a lot of information in family newsletter that we sent out last Wednesday. So a lot of the links that you would need to get more information are also listed on there as well, and also on our website as well.
So Sandra, those are going to go out after the webinar tonight to all
Yes,
first grade parents?
After the webinar, yes. And we have a lot of great info on our webpage, or our website as well.
And a question that some have had, Dr. Swinyard and Heather, what about 1-2 combination classes? Do the second graders come back with a 1-2 combo?
Yes.
So next week they should come back too.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And those families will be notified.
Very good. So, Heather, tell us about the first day of school next Monday and Tuesday. How's that
Right?
going to work?
It's a week away. It'll be some parts of what you're used to, right? That excitement at home, that packing the backpack and, reassuring your child. It will just look different when it comes to drop off. So the drop off locations will be the same, but I know it's a lot of our family practices to walk our students in and things like that. I know it's been covered that there will be a place for you to say goodbye to your student and then for someone from the school to kind of shepherd them into the building. Know that they'll be looking for friendly faces. The staff is there and ready. This is a highlight for them to get to welcome and be excited with the first graders as they return. Face coverings, all of the safety protocols will be in place at that drop-off moment and the pickup. When you see our staff, you'll see us in masks, you'll see us socially distanced, you'll see us teaching kids just kind of, with our elbows or doing different distance high fives and things like that to kind of help acclimate them that this is a little different. And we know first graders are coming with some knowledge of what school looked like when they left. So we'll be there and just kind of helping them adjust to this kind of new normal for this school year.
And Mr. Price, after the first few days of school, if a parent needs to pick up their student from school, how does that work? Do they get to go down to the classroom or do they just check in at the office? How does that work?
All of our buildings have those protocols outlined. What we ask any visitor to a building to do is to come on in, and we have the single secure point entry. So you get buzzed into the office, at which point we do check with the parent, see what it is the need. And if we're just picking up a student, what we will do is call down to the classroom and have the student come to the office for the parent so that they may sign them out and leave at that point. That just limits the number of our adults out and about in the building.
Gotcha. So those are kind of safety and health protocols 101 during this COVID time. We would open it up to, I think Heather's going to moderate asking different ones of us questions that have come up in the chat. And then we will wrap up this evening after those, answering some of those questions.
Yes, thanks. I've been screening through. We have a very active panel answering lots of questions. So I'm going to try and pull some of the most frequent ones just to answer for the larger audience, and then kind of dig in on some that are more specific. So Becky, lots of questions around masks. And I know Adam kind of referenced what a mask break could look like outside. Could you explain, can you do a mask break if there is weather that prohibits kids from going outside? So just kind of, I think people are trying to picture what that looks like.
Sure. And we are working on that right now as well. And so some of our options are to rotate small groups of students to a covered area so that they can still be distanced, but be able to take those mask breaks. So we are working on that right now, trying to make sure that we have everything in place for when it really becomes crummy to be outside on the playground.
Thank you. Clint, kind of in partnership with this, questions around recess. And so just knowing how important, especially for our youngest kids, it is to play and get to have kind of that free spirit time. Can you describe what recess has looked like for kindergarten and what we kind of foresee it looking like for first grade?
Well, what you can expect to see when classes are out on the playground, we do have our building safety teams who have taken the time to make sure that kids are playing with their own cohort group. So some of those playgrounds are kind of sectioned off by cones so that we're sure that classrooms are playing with their own classrooms. And while we are at play, our masks are on. And during those times, though, we also have some very structured mask breaks that students are allowed to take while they're out there playing. But you will see kids out and about. They've been playing soccer. They've been on the big toys. Kids need that play. They need that activity time and that social interaction time. And we recognize that. And you'll notice that students are taking multiple recesses every day.
Dr. Swinyard, what about day camp for the rotational days? Is that available?
Yeah, families that have been accessing day camp will have the opportunity to continue similar access during the phasing. And then, as we have mentioned, when students are on their off day, so when they're not attending in person, we're providing facilitated learning activities district-wide for students. This is something that was successful with kindergartners. It won't be your first grade teacher facilitating the activity. We want the first grade teachers focused on the group that's in front of them in the classroom that day, so they can really maximize their efforts, getting them used to those routines and those habits. And those facilitated activities will be led by our district curriculum coordinators. So we want to keep the learning going when students are on their off day, and that'll happen through those district-wide experiences.
Okay, Clint, when can families expect to know their AB assignment?
Oh, good question. Buildings are working on those lists as we speak, taking a look at those names, trying to make sure, because sometimes we already have a kindergartner that may already be attending, and we're trying to match up some family times. But by the end of the week, every family should be aware whether they are an A or a B student, so they're ready to go on Monday.
Thank you. This is an easy one, Becky. Can they wear gator masks?
No. Thanks for the easy question.
I didn't say it was the answer people wanted, just that it was an easy response.
Yeah, the jury is really out on that one. So no, we're asking for cloth-based masks.
Okay. This one is for Becky Ramsey, and it's about how will their IEP be served when historically they've been pulled for small group?
It's important that we keep your students with their own cohorts, so they'll stay with the students from their own class. So the special ed teacher will either push in and provide supports within their first grade classroom, or they could be pulled out for those services, but they would only be pulled out with students from their same classroom.
Thank you. I would say one of the most popular questions out there is around what to do if students are sick. So if my student is sick, to me, there's one answer. Then there is my student has symptoms, but is still well enough to engage in learning. And those to me are two different responses. If your student's sick, we're always saying, take care of your child, let them be sick, let them have the downtime. But if a student is going to miss school, either through an exposure or a wondering if they have symptoms, and so they're doing the 10 days, we are working on district resource materials for students and families to access so that the learning can kind of stay in pace with what they're having in the classroom. And we're building those modules out for the return of first grade. So know that those will be available. Your classroom teachers will have access to them. And then we can probably build them out into the family part of the web page as well. So let's see. Dr. Anderson, for students that are still at home, second, third grade and up, the meal plans are still available for pickup? That was a question.
So yes, we will still be providing the 5-day kits for grades 2 through 12. Those will be distributed on the same days that they have been and the same times. So yes, that meal program will continue.
So Nurse Becky, a few more mask questions. So questions about, are there risks to kids touching their masks? So we're talking about them at lunch, mask off, take a bite, mask up. And so lots of questions around touching of masks.
Sure. And so the hope is that we can touch it here, right? The loop that goes behind the ear, and that's how I take off my mask, or just, I take it off of one ear and just hold it down here. So it's more of this sort of motion, because that is a valid concern. We don't want the kids, we're trying to teach people not to touch their faces and touch the outside of the mask here as much as possible. So being able to just unloop it from your ear is a good way to teach how to do that.
Thank you. So I'm going to piggyback. There's another mask question. So there was a few out there about if there's a mask exemption in the classroom. So will those students wear face shields, or are there extra safety protocols? I think people are thinking it's far more prevalent than it is, but just to kind of address those concerns.
Sure. And I understand the concern, and it has not been prevalent. So, and I do a lot of work with this with Becky Ramsey, and honestly, what we try to do is make sure that the students and the staff in those rooms, we provide them with extra PPE and make sure that we're keeping everybody safe, really minding that social distance. And it is for very valid medical reasons when it does happen, but it has been rare. So just rest assured, it's not something that has commonly happened.
Thank you. Dr. Anderson, I'm giving you an easy one this time. Can families pack their own lunches or breakfast?
Yes, they can, and that's allowable to bring, but do realize the federal government is providing a pretty nutritious free meal program, so think about that as well.
And with that, the breakfast is served every day to all students. It's available at start of the day once all the kids are in the classroom. Breakfast.
Yes, so breakfast is typically served to first grade. We're at kindergarten between 8:30 and 9 in the classroom as part of the regular day. And as far as our teachers are concerned, they will be supervising the students eating their lunches in the classroom as well. Teachers will get their kind of break during the recess time. So they'll have their break during recess while students are outside. Then students will be eating their lunch, and it'll be delivered to the classroom. So they won't have to go through a line or anything. It'll be delivered to the classroom at lunchtime.
Clint, can you kind of walk families through what drop-off looks like? Because I think people are trying to get their head around pulling up to school that first day. And I think it looks so different at all of our sites because of just their layout, but just kind of giving people the visual.
Yeah, it really does depend on the school site, on what that drop off looks like. Some sites only have one or two places you can drop off, while other buildings, you're able to drop off on multiple spots. But what you'll see when you pull up is you'll see teachers and other school personnel out there, not just only to make sure our kids are safe as they're getting in and out of cars, but again, to meet you there and be able to allow you to say goodbye to your child right outside. And we will then escort them on into the building and make sure they make it safely to their classrooms where they can have breakfast after.
And am I right, Mr. Price, that the students who have been participating in our day camp program, they kind of come in a different door than where the pickup and drop off is for students who are not in day camp?
They do. Most of our sites have a separate entrance for our day camp students, just to keep the amount of traffic down at any given door.
Right.
Sandra, can you explain what the asterisk means on the COVID dashboard?
Yes, it is. Let me go back to it. Sorry, I haven't been on it for today. It's presumed that student was presumed to have a positive test.
Thank you. And with that, Nurse Becky, if there is a positive case, can you explain the notification process? Like, is the whole class shut down? How does that work, and how are families notified?
So that was a little, you had a little bit of a quarantine in there and a little bit of a notification. So if there is a case in a classroom, then yes, the families would of course be notified. The building staff and families would be notified. But to the other part of that was quarantining, and that completely depends on the situation. It depends on many factors, and that's something that we follow health department guidelines for, in terms of, we don't shut down a whole classroom. That's not our goal. We are very targeted in the quarantining according to the local health guidelines.
So I think it's important that parents know that we are having, which sometimes is usual, sometimes it's not, for first grade classrooms, we are actually having seating charts where the teacher is keeping a seating chart of where the kids are sitting, because am I right, Becky? That helps you and your team know who's closest to maybe a student who's been exposed or has symptoms.
Yes, and again, we're using those health department guidelines for any quarantining that we do in a classroom, and that's very dependent on the seating chart. And so having those for every single class is very important.
And I would also say that we update the COVID dashboard every Friday at 5 o'clock. So parents will be able to go on and look to see what their school building looks like. And we do send a letter if there is a positive test or a positive case in the classroom or in the building.
So I'm not sure if this is Dr. Anderson or Nurse Becky, just to talk through what are the cleaning protocols that we've shared with our staff, either in terms of equipment, if they're in health and fitness, or what are the extra layers that we're kind of putting into place as students return?
So I believe Sandra will be sending you out in that postcard the instructions we've given to our teachers on the cleaning protocols. But basically with elementary classrooms, we are having them, because students are in their own desk, we are having the teachers, classroom teachers, disinfect the desk once a day. We're kind of leaving it up to the teacher what part of the day, but most likely at the end of the day, before the next day. Then our evening custodial shift is coming in, and they are doing all the high touch areas, the sinks, the light switches, the pencil sharpeners, any place where kids may touch frequently, they're doing that piece. So our teachers are doing the desk and the chairs, the seats, and then our custodians are doing all the other high touch areas at the elementary level, minimum once a day. In our specialist classroom, art, music, other kinds of STEM or science classrooms, our teachers are actually doing it between each class. So they're spraying down the desks or spraying down the chairs and cleaning those between classes. And this has been recommended by the health department.
So with that, Dr. Anderson, can you also speak to the ventilation systems? There's lots of questions around how air is being circulated and if we've done anything different.
So since the beginning of the COVID pandemic, we've increased our airflow and all of our facility bringing in more outside fresh air. So we've been following again the health department protocols on the amount of fresh air and flushing that goes on in our schools. And so that's been going on since this summer because we've had the express program going on, the day camps, et cetera.
Thank you. Dr. Swinyard, I'm going to give you the last question because it's going to be heavy. I think what we're seeing in the chat and what we're hearing in the community and from our staff is around, I would say, wonderings around K2. Like, are we following the guidance around K2? What are the safety requirements to bring K2 students back? And why not more? Why not third and up? And why not? And so I think there's a lot of different information sources, and just so that families can hear where we're operating from.
Yeah, so one of the challenges of this experience is there's so much different pieces of information out there, and we even see that tonight in your questions. Is one parent's representing one organization, another parent's referencing another organization. I regularly get emails from a parent or a community member, and they're saying, open our schools, and here's all the data, here's all the research, here's all the organizations that support that, now open our schools. And literally moments later, I'll get another email and it'll say, close our schools, and here's all the data, and here's all the research, and here's all the organizations that support that decision, now close our schools. And this is such a challenging moment because there isn't consensus in our community on what's the best way to move forward. And we've consistently said as a school district that we're going to follow the guidelines of public health officials that directly oversee Spokane County, and that's the Department of Health at the state level, and it's the Spokane Regional Health District. This summer, the Department of Health came out with a framework for reopening our schools, and it's based on case counts for the county, and it establishes 3 different ranges of school reopening: a high risk range, a medium risk, and a low risk. Our county has consistently been in the high risk range, and in the high risk range, the allowable educational modalities is for students to have small group instruction or students to return in cohorts for very specific populations of students, one of those being early learners. So during the summer, when those guidelines came out, our health district came out and said that despite those guidelines, they really recommended that everyone start in distance learning. And we complied with that recommendation, as has been our commitment. And there were families that supported that decision, and there were families that were frustrated by that decision. As we moved into September, as we worked with Dr. Lutz and Mark Springer, their chief epidemiologist, Dr. Lutz supported and provided guidelines from the health district that we should start phasing back our K2 students, which fits underneath the umbrella of that statewide framework that was delivered by the Department of Health. And so that's the plan that we are operating under at this point, is bringing back our K2 students, doing it slowly and methodically, ensuring that we're being very careful and thoughtful. We're watching really closely, as I said, the transmission rates in our schools. Despite the increasing case counts in our county, which have risen in recent days and weeks, we continue to not see transmission occur in our schools outside of just that one specific case. So that's reinforcing the guidance that we have received from our public health officials, that if you follow these protocols and these safety measures that you've heard about this evening, that so far the data indicates that we can keep our staff and our students safe. We're going to continue to adhere to those, and we're going to continue to monitor things very, very closely. We are starting to hear acknowledgement from many of our public health officials that transmission rates in schools across our state has been low, and we'll continue to follow that conversation very closely as we evaluate how best to move forward. So our current plan is for K2. That's the plan that we are implementing. We're going to watch the data very closely. We're going to listen to our families about how that's going. And we're going to continue to work with the public health officials at the state and local level on how best to move forward. So we know that there are some families that are eager for more grade levels to come back. We know that there are some families that are very resistant to that idea. And we're going to, as I said, watch this thing very closely, watch the data closely, and seek the guidance from our public health officials as we move forward. So with that said, I just thank you to the panel. Thank you for being here. If you have other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. You know, that's the best pathway forward for us to partner together is if you have questions or wonderings or frustrations or concerns, please reach out. Give us the opportunity to process that with you, give you the best information that we can so that you can decide what's best for your family and how best you're going to approach this situation. So our job is to do everything we can to keep your kids safe and to give you the best information possible. So with that, we're excited to see your first grader next week, and take care and be well.
Good night, everyone.